Hello, I'm Randy Cross. Welcome to Unsafe Spaces, Season 3, Episode 7. Interesting week all the way around. I think you have to admit, whether it's the world of sports or anything else, we've had a week we should all mark down. A lot of the events that happened. Be kind of nice if people studied things a little bit more. Studying is like actually reading on them, just FYI, instead of like reposting things. But anyway, the show today will be very, very similar to every other one you've seen. I'm joined today by Aaron Taylor, colleague from CBS Sports, good friend, founder of the Joe Moore Award, and a guy that I think we'll all enjoy the conversation. You'll see why I enjoy Aaron so much. For right now, let's hit the interview. Welcome, and as promised, joining us right now is Aaron Taylor from CBS Sports, founder of the Joe Moore Award that recognizes the best offensive line in the country. Aaron, former Notre Dame All-American and a good friend. Aaron, welcome.
What's up, Randy? It's about time you had me on, man.
Yeah, I mean, hey, before we get too much into the state of college football or anything else related, how about that game of yours Saturday night with Old Dominion and Virginia Tech?
I think it was the upset of the season and the biggest win in Old Dominion history. It was an absolute blast to be a part of. And with no disrespect to the Monarchs, man, but you felt like you were almost in a big Texas high school stadium. It was the classic David versus Goliath, man, and it was fun. Those guys are a much better team, I think, the Monarchs are, than their 0-3 record suggested. And I think once again we learned that there were some teams early on in the season with that impressive win that Virginia Tech had against Florida State. I think Virginia Tech was a little bit of fool's gold, and because they were a young team, I think they walked in there thinking that they were going to be home back in the 757 where a lot of their Hokie players are from, that they were going to take it to Old Dominion, but they put their backup quarterback in there on the second series of the game, LaRussa, and he just lit them up, man. It was an awesome, awesome event to be a part of. And so we've been lucky, man. We've had 3 upsets this year. We had Colorado State over Arkansas, San Diego State over Arizona State, and then Old Dominion over Virginia Tech. So it's been an upset season so far. And this weekend we had 6 ranked teams that went down. Army almost got
that was close.
Oklahoma. It was unbelievable.
I tell you, the great scene, that whole Army-Oklahoma thing, was the Army team going off the field to a standing ovation there at the tunnel as they were leaving from the Oklahoma fans.
It was unbelievable, man. And then you saw the picture that the Army equipment staff tweeted out after. It said simply, "Leave it like you found it." The locker room was immaculate. It was the most it was what college football should be about, is what Army and Oklahoma represented. It was outstanding.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Really, really. How was the atmosphere at Old Dominion, by the way? Was it kind of crazed? What was it like?
It was awesome, man. Like after the game, like you got to understand, like there's literally no barrier between the stands and the field. So like the post-game interviews, there's no room in the locker rooms. They literally were held on the field. You can see Justin Fuente, Virginia Tech's head coach, getting interviewed after the game with a stand-up step and repeat. That was actually on the field. Wow. So the field was a mob scene. The press box was really small. It was certainly, a celebratory atmosphere. The Virginia Tech players, to their credit, I think running off the field were very respectful. But I mean, that was the win of the university. That was the biggest win in their history.
Oh yeah.
And it was a packed house, and it wasn't just Virginia Tech fans. I mean, the schools are about 5.5 hours apiece, but it was a party, man. I mean, I was popping champagne and dancing. They had music going. It was quite the event, man. It was really, really fun.
That's fantastic. What struck you the rest of the games, the rest of the stuff, besides the obvious one thing, that gigantic elephant in the corner of the room, that Alabama's pretty good?
Man, that's the thing, Randy, that I think is really this year's shaping up to be. It's Alabama and everybody else. And there's some really good teams behind them. Georgia's a really good team, Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State. But it really seems like Alabama's kind of the cream of the crop. And that was the thing that Nick Saban got on the podium after the game, was talking about rat poison. Was like, hey, write some stuff, that my guys don't do well. They're going to read their press clippings, and he doesn't want them to stub their toe, kind of like Virginia Tech did. I think it's a different situation there. But, I mean, Army taking Oklahoma into overtime and getting them to the mat. It was interesting. I really enjoyed that Stanford-Oregon game, and watching that was a heartbreaking loss for Oregon. Just a cacophony of errors, man, the way that thing shook out. But this season is fun. Like, that was my big takeaway through the first 3 weeks is I don't know who in the hell's good. I don't know how good anybody is, right? Like, I know Alabama's good, but how good are these other teams? I think this is going to be one of those seasons where we get into week 9, 10, 11. There's going to be some banana stuff that happens, particularly in the Big 12, that I think nobody's going to see coming. And Kentucky, with their win over Mississippi State, that was kind of a foregone conclusion that the Bulldogs are going to win that one. And Kentucky said not so fast. So it was some good ball this weekend.
Yeah, I know. I picked Mississippi State. That wasn't
so did I. I think we all did.
Yeah, we did. And I believe we made a comment about that was good for Kentucky. And it turned out being good for Kentucky.
Oh, my gosh.
Games like the one you did, like the Old Dominion, Virginia Tech. Let's go down the list. I mean, so far in this first month of this season, not so much FCS, FBS, but the Group of Five and the Big Five. Are even games like that eventually going to be an endangered species?
Probably. It's interesting. The big boys, the Power Five, and no disrespect to our good buddy Mike Oresco with the Power Six in the American.
Yeah.
The Power Five, that pie has grown exponentially, and they don't want to have to share that pie with anybody else if they don't have to. They want to be able to be the ones that determine how big of a piece and a sliver that they could put on the plate of the other Group of Five schools.
Yeah, and there's a power inside the Power Five. Half of the Power Five controls that money.
There's no question. So you've got this situation where you've got all this big pot of money. You have a certain select schools that are in control of it. I think eventually at some point, the Power Five and the Group of Five separate out. And I think we've already started to see it. It's just happening in slow motion. And I think it's the Autonomy Five. I mean, the divisions have already started to take place. I think eventually, once we go to a bigger playoff system, I think it's going to be hard to add too many more games given the constraints on the collegiate level. But at some point, if you have to go an 18 playoff or even bigger, I think you'll see a smaller regular season. And it's in those cases where the Power Five, Group of Five games start to go away.
Well, I mentioned it in the open, and I've got my you can't see this. Obviously, you're on the phone. I'm holding up my Joe Moore Award pin. How things going on that? I mean, it's a fantastic award. It recognizes the best offensive line in the country. And it's something that is got to be very gratifying for you because the way it's been embraced from inside the community, not even inside the football community, but inside a smaller subset, which is inside the line part of the community.
Yeah, we're a special kind of special O-lineman, man. We all kind of gravitate towards each other. It's one of the only positions where you could walk into a room of strangers of offensive linemen and reminisce over shared experiences and stories. It's fun, man. It's been the most rewarding thing I think I've done as an adult in terms of a project-wise, and not because of what we built, but because of what we've created. And you hit it, man. It's community. It's those conference calls that we have. It's all the tape that we watch. It's how engaged everybody is, including the offensive line community within collegiate football. We've got, look at the list of the dudes that we have that give their time during the most busy time of the year, starting with you, and then Pat Hill and Cole Kubelik and Jeff Schwartz and Lance Zierlein and Duke Miniweather and Dave Harding. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of guys that are gainfully employed, have a ton of other things to do, but grind out tape week after week. Mike Golick Jr., we know how busy he is with all the stuff he does on ESPN, but guys are committed. And the reason that we are is because we finally created a way, I think, to acknowledge the significance and the impact that offensive line play means to winning football. We've always had kind of this foregone conclusion that, oh, you got to win in the trenches. Well, now we've got a way to acknowledge those units that are allowing their teams to do it. So in year one, when Alabama did it, there was nobody in the country that was more physical for them than them. They were head and shoulders above everybody else. Then in year two, we had Iowa, who came out of nowhere after week 8. They weren't even literally worth watching the first 2 or 3 weeks, but there was nobody that year that was better on tape than them those last 4 games. And then, of course, Notre Dame just pummeling people a year ago. So I don't know who the hell is going to win it this year. The offensive line play's been down these first couple weeks. I think Georgia probably, if it ended right now, would probably win, but I don't know how tested they've been. So there's some work to do to earn this. We don't gift this award. The units earn it, and we merely give it to them after they've earned it. But it's going to be an interesting year once again, man.
Yeah. And one thing that's been good to see, you know, as an old offensive lineman, is social media is actually getting semi-educated sort of vicariously, but because of all the OL, the offensive line stuff, the sort of what you would call it OL porn that a lot of the guys are putting out there, just those unbelievable plays and blocks and just, you know, because people don't see that enough.
Tell you what, man, you just gave me a moment of pause when I just had some bad visuals with O-line porn, but I'm gonna keep it moving.
Hey, there's a market. There's a market for everything.
I tell you what, here in New York City, there absolutely would be, man.
All right, man. Hey, really appreciate you joining me. Hey, where are you next week?
Shoot, who do we got? Boise State at Wyoming, and with the way these upsets have been going, man, I mean, you look at these teams on paper. Boise State with Brett Rippon, he's chucking the football around. They got Wingard, that great safety at Wyoming, so that's going to be a good matchup to watch. But Boise State was one of those teams that was maybe going to grab one of those coveted group of 5 spots, and with that loss to Oklahoma State, their chances get harder. But if they run the table and Oklahoma State ends up making some noise in the Big 12, not that lost to Texas Tech last weekend would help them, but Boise State's not completely out of it, but they've got their work cut out for them.
Yeah, they do. All right, Aaron, man. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right. Well, thank you to Aaron Taylor. Really, really good stuff. And let's be honest, you now know about Old Dominion, and you probably didn't before. All right, time now for the wonderful world of Unsafe Spaces Sports. Oh, yeah, wild weekend in the world of college football. We just talked a little bit about probably the most shocking result of 2018 so far. And let's kick off our scores with the score on that game, which was absolutely bizarro world. Old Dominion 49-35 over Virginia Tech at their place at Old Dominion. But regardless, a monster upset, biggest, as Aaron said, biggest win in the history of the Old Dominion program, and a pretty significant embarrassment for Virginia Tech. Next up, to no one's surprise, Alabama trucked Texas A&M. A&M's a program that's coming up. Alabama is heads and shoulders above almost everybody else, which is usually the time where somebody stumbles. But that would require rat poison. And Nick Saban was actually asking for rat poison from the press. Give my guys the stuff they're doing wrong. Don't write about the stuff they're doing right. It's the best. All right, next up, a game that, heck, I was wrong on. TCU had their hats handed to them by Texas. Texas, great job. Fantastic. Coach Herman and company have got to be really, really excited about what Texas has going on right now. Aaron and I, our good buddy Brian Jones, he's overly happy right now with Texas. Next up, the Stanford Cardinal. Oops. That's a color, by the way. They were trailing big time to Oregon late in this game. In fact, about the beginning of the fourth quarter, what didn't look like much of a game. Well, it turned into one heck of a game in the second half, and Oregon just collapsed, an epic collapse. And Stanford wins 38-31. Next on the list, another big game. I think that surprised a lot of people, especially SEC fans. Mississippi State came into this game. Good defense, tough running game, tough physical, and they got their butts whipped. Kentucky did it. Mark Stoops and company, congratulations. Great to see you. Now you're listed at number 17 in the AP Top 25. Let's see how you do it from here. But what a great game and a really good win. And the last game of the weekend was also an SEC game. And Florida, who suddenly, kind of like Texas, seems to be alive, just trucked Tennessee. Jeremy Pruitt and company up on Rocky Top got some work to do. Got a lot of work to do. Hey, something happened here in Atlanta at East Lake Country Club. Tiger Woods won the Tour Championship yesterday. And in case you've been living under a rock and didn't know that, he sort of ran away with it Saturday and stayed in front of everybody on Sunday. It was a win reminiscent of the way he used to win. I love it when they list stuff in days. It's been about 5 years. Let's put it that way. And he's been playing extremely well, and he put it all together on the right weekend. This is not a major for those of you that don't know golf well. So technically he's not back winning majors, but man, he won $1 gazillion, which is an actual number when it comes to golf these days and the amount of money they hand out. And he and the USA will be over in France for the Ryder Cup this weekend, and he's got a world of confidence. We're going to scroll real quick through the NFL scores from yesterday. There were quite a few, I guess, surprises, you might say. The number one, or first, I should say, game we're going to talk about is the Rams and the Chargers, the Falcons and the Saints. And that was, I guess, it was exciting. Not exactly defensive filled. Two teams trying to find defenses. Well, Atlanta found the least amount of defense, and they lost. New England scored a touchdown in overtime to beat them. Not a good look so far for Atlanta. They're down a lot of people on the defensive side of the ball, and it does look like it. All right, number two, the game I thought was first, the Rams and the Chargers. Rams are legit. Sean McVay is doing a fantastic job, and right now they do own L.A., and yes, those are both L.A. teams. And yes, there's no longer a team in San Diego. And yeah, I mentioned that on the air Saturday night and got a lot of nasty notes on Twitter. Thank you. Spelled my name right, so it was all good. Fantastic. All right, now San Francisco and Kansas City played for about a half. For the first half, Kansas City beat San Francisco about the head. Hard. And it wasn't even funny. And now it looks like Jimmy Garoppolo might have torn his ACL and maybe out the rest of the year. So hope is slowly dying for the Niners. And they were so optimistic. Yeah, stuff happens. Next up on the list, the Eagles bring Carson Wentz back as their starting quarterback. And what a way to do it. A late rally. They beat Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts. Congratulations to Carson Wentz, because it's been about 10 months since he got hurt, approximately. And to come back already from an ACL and look the way he did and run the way he did and move around, great job by him. I loved it. And the last game of the night was a game that people thought was going to be a real stinker. Well, you know what? It was. Detroit smacked New England. And it wasn't that close. Detroit was a team that couldn't get out of their own way for a couple weeks. But wow. All right, and the last story in sports is the Atlanta Braves. And whether you're a Braves fan or a baseball fan or whatever, you have to appreciate what the Braves have done. Because we see this in sports occasionally. This whole idea of worst to first. Atlanta was pathetic. Atlanta's general manager was banned from baseball for cheating and the way he was signing some kids. I mean, it looked pathetic for the Braves going forward. You know what? They forgot to tell the 2018 Atlanta Braves. And congratulations to them. They're a mix of young players, older players, good arms. Their manager, Brian Snitker, has done an exemplary job. And they know enough about celebrating. They may be new, but they know to wear the goggles around all the champagne when you win the East. Congratulations to the Braves, and that'll do it for Unsafe Spaces Sports. All right, let's move right along, and I want to thank you all for viewing. I want to remind you where you can find Unsafe Spaces out there. You can find it on Twitter. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. You go to unsafespacesUSA.com. If you have any suggestions, send those to producer@unsafespaces.com. Well, time now, as usual, for us to wish you a happy trails.
Happy trails until we meet again. Who cares about the clouds when we're together? Just sing a song and think about sunny weather. Happy trails till we meet again.